کنفرانس آنلاین در پارلمان اروپا. استمرار جنایت علیه بشریت در ایران. وظایف سیاسی و اخلاقی اروپا.
سخنرانیهای 37 پارلمانتر و شخصیت سیاسی اروپا. فراخوان به پیگرد عاملان و آمران قتل عام 67 و کشتار 1500 تن در قیام آبان 98 و تأکید بر اعزام هیئت تحقیق بین المللی به ایران.
سخنرانیهای رادکا آنا بونتریسکو، آنا فوتیگا، تونه کلام.
Dear Iranian friends, greetings from the European Parliament. I just wanted to say and send this message to show my concern for the situation of ordinary people of Iran. Almost exactly 1 year ago, in the course of mass protests of Iranian people, we were able in the parliament to debate the violent actions taken by the regime of mullahs against its own people. And European Parliament, by majority of MEPs, condemned actions taken against people, affecting many deaths, imprisonment of thousands of people. The whole situation was exacerbated by eruption of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in particular in Iran, with the poor state of healthcare, but also by really dreadful conditions of political prisoners in prisons. It was real disaster, and people felt it deeply. We stay by people. We want to support them on our daily activities in the European Parliament. We try to stay in touch by people of Iran and show our solidarity. We support requests for changes in Iran, for respect human rights, to respect the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to give people their citizens' rights and possibility to live peacefully, to abandon death penalty, in particular death penalty against minors, because actually in many cases it is common situation in Iran, and people face this disastrous development of events. We would also like Iran to see the prosperous economic development, enabling many ordinary small-scale traders to benefit from riches of the country, from raw materials and producing capabilities Iran has. I think that we have to stay firm, that we have to expose the atrocities of Mullah regime, in particular the attitudes vis-à-vis political prisoners and the attitude vis-à-vis women, minors, and also citizens of dual citizenship, because persecution was a common experience also of many Europeans of Iranian origin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Fotika, for your speech. You have always supported our movement because you are committed to the value of Europe. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, colleagues, Madame Rajavi, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. Indeed, we have come a long way together with PMOI. As an MEP, I joined the Friends of Free Iran group about 16 years ago and served as one of its vice presidents. We had the opportunity to observe and support your fight to clear the PMOI name in the European Court, pave your way to the European Parliament, and participate in your various activities. My most memorable impression was visiting the first Ashraf camp 12 years ago, together with Alejo Vidal-Quadras and 2 other colleagues. My last visit to newborn Ashraf III was in November 2018, where we met with Madame Rajavi. The creativity, morals, sincerity and determination of the Ashraf residents have convinced me that you will overcome. Today, this change is nearer than any time before, and therefore it is crucial to realize that democratic countries are part of the solution. In fact, they bear direct responsibility for the continuation of Tehran's inhuman and aggressive dictatorship. Western ambiguity, pragmatic economic interests and double standards are helping to prolong the mullah's bloody rule. We need to realize that every additional day of this regime means new arrests, new executions and new suppression. It is high time to conclude that the 2015 nuclear deal has failed the expectations that were cherished in the West. It has shown that the Tehran regime has absolutely no intention of meeting its commitments or to become more humane. On the contrary, mullahs have used the deal to gather strength and intensify their aggression across the Middle East. Today, it has become clear that only a regime change can make Iran a normal, friendly and nuclear-free country. Madame Rajavi's 10-point program is the only realistic way to achieve this goal. There's no other scenario to solve Iran's problem, internally as well as externally. The change in Iran is a sovereign right of the Iranians, but it can be advanced by the change of EU's policy. As a former MEP, I am disappointed that the EU policy has been kept appeasing the mullahs despite so many horrific crimes. The EU has mostly looked aside or just paid lip service in reacting to these crimes. We must react not by whispering our concern, but by concrete actions. We must impose sanctions on this regime for their human rights breaches or risk losing EU's own credibility. We must recall our ambassadors, if needed, from Tehran to protest the regime's inhuman behavior. The EU has to demand unhindered access to Iran's prisons, especially to the prisoners held since November last year's protests. Iranian nation is clearly fed up with a ruling theocracy. This is proven by people's widespread and continuing uprising, by the slogans, for example, down with dictator, be it Shah or the supreme religious leader. The people of Iran want a free and peaceful country. They deserve the right and dignity to be restored. Therefore, it is a duty of every citizen of the free world, especially politicians, to support the Iranian people's aspirations for democracy and freedom. Let us keep working together to that end and be sure that I will continue to stand with you until the day that Iran will be free. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Tony Kella. Thank you for your strong speech. You talked about your visit to Ashraf 1 and Ashraf 3 and they resolved to overthrow the mullah's dictatorship and establish freedom of Iran. I'm sure this is within reach.
Dear colleagues, the human rights situation in Iran is very worrying, and what is worse is that the violations are ongoing. Women are the first targets of this regime despite the persistent attack on their fundamental rights. Iran women keep courageously fighting the regime. We saw it in the protests last year, where 1,500 protesters were killed last November. Many protesters were arrested and are right now in terrible conditions imprisoned. We have debated on many occasions at the European Parliament the need to end violence and suppression in Iran, and now with the news coming from Iran of all the execution and death sentences, serious action is needed. The Iranian regime cannot continue to violate the human rights of its own Iranian people. The EU should strongly oppose the autocratic government that violates fundamental rights of its citizens and should use its political and economical powers to help the opposition. I would like to thank all of you, and especially Ms. Rajavi, for your tireless efforts for a democratic and free Iran. We stand with you and the Iranian people in your aspiration for democracy, and we hope that 4 decades of suffering will end very soon. Thank you.
Grazie per l'invito, amici della Resistenza iraniana. Tenevo particolarmente a intervenire al vostro incontro, anche se con un video, proprio in occasione della giornata mondiale contro la pena di morte. La violazione dei diritti basilari, i diritti umani, dei principi di libertà da parte dei regimi autoritari non può mai essere derubricato come un affare interno del paese. Deve obbligatoriamente riguardare ed interessare tutti gli altri, cittadini, governi e parlamenti. E su questo il coronavirus ci ha dimostrato quanto siamo interconnessi e quanto quegli affari interni di un paese sono anche affari di tutti gli altri. Quanti contagi, quanti morti, quanti tamponi in Iran. Non avremmo mai dato certi. Se avessimo saputo tempestivamente cosa stava accadendo in Cina agli inizi dell'anno, avremmo reagito prima e meglio a quella che poi è diventata una pandemia. Credo proprio di sì. Da cittadina sono turbata profondamente nel vedere un grande popolo come quello iraniano, impotente rispetto alle barbarie perpetrate contro gli oppositori politici o contro chiunque agisca o pensi in modo differente da quanto considerato lecito dal regime. Vanno aiutati dall'esterno coloro che invece hanno la forza di alzare la testa e di protestare all'interno. La pressione mediatica, di opinione e soprattutto quella politica dovrebbe essere costante e non intervenire solo come mezzo di censura nei confronti di esecuzioni eclatanti e vergognose come quella ultima di Navid Afkari, il pugile arrestato e condannato a morte perché aveva con tanti altri partecipato a manifestazioni di protesta. Cari amici iraniani che assistete impotenti da qui, in Europa, a queste drammatiche ingiustizie perpetrate contro il vostro popolo, voglio dirvi che non siete soli. Il vostro paese ha una peculiarità invidiabile che potrebbe davvero giocare un ruolo determinante nella lotta al regime. I vostri giovani, che rappresentano la maggioranza degli 80 milioni di abitanti. Da qui abbiamo il dovere, ognuno secondo il proprio ruolo e le proprie responsabilità, di aiutare in ogni modo, soprattutto approfittando di internet e dei social media, i giovani iraniani a riprendersi il proprio futuro, fatto di libertà e di rispetto dei diritti.